The pool was gone. 20 years of memories erased overnight. Karen's manicured fingers trembled as she dialed 911, her voice cracking with rage. "They stole my pool! I want them arrested!" But as the sirens wailed closer, she had no idea the officers rushing to her rescue would soon be placing handcuffs on her wrists instead. Some secrets can't stay buried, even when you fill them with concrete. The demolition crew was still packing their equipment when Karen Whitmore burst through, her front door like a woman possessed, her perfectly styled blonde hair whipped behind her as she stumbled across her manicured lawn, her designer heels sinking into the soft earth where her pristine pool deck had been just yesterday. "What have you done?" she screamed, her voice carrying, across the quiet suburban neighborhood. "Where is my pool?" The foreman, a weathered man named Miguel Santos, looked up from loading his jackhammer. He'd been dreading this moment since dawn, when they'd finished filling the massive hole with concrete. "Ma'am, we completed the work as requested. The permits were all—" "I never requested this." Karen's face flushed crimson as she gestured wildly at the smooth concrete pad where her Olympic-sized pool had been. "This is destruction of property. This is criminal," finished a voice behind her. Karen spun around to find her husband David standing in the doorway, still in his bathrobe, coffee mug in hand. His salt and pepper hair was disheveled, and dark circles shadowed his eyes, the same exhausted look he'd worn for months. "David, thank God you're here!" Karen rushed toward him. "Call the police! These criminals destroyed our pool!" David took a slow sip of his coffee, never breaking eye contact with his wife of 23 years. "I signed the permits, Karen." The words hit her like a physical blow. "What?" "I hired them. I paid them. And I specifically requested they start at dawn so you'd sleep through it." Miguel cleared his throat uncomfortably. "We'll just finish loading up." He motioned to his crew, who began working with renewed urgency. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. You can't do this. This is my house, too. That pool cost us $60,000. "Actually, it cost us $120,000, David said quietly. "You seem to forget the renovations you insisted on last year. The infinity edge, the imported Italian tiles, the underwater lighting system. So what?" Karen's voice climbed to a shriek. "That doesn't give you the right to what? To make a decision about our property?" David's voice remained eerily calm. "Like the decision you made to take out a second mortgage without telling me? Or the decision to max out our credit cards? On your shopping sprees?" The color drained from Karen's face. "How did you find out about the secret credit cards, the hidden bank account, the $40,000 you borrowed from Emma's college fund?" David's knuckles whitened around his coffee mug. "I'm an accountant, Karen. Numbers don't lie. People do." Karen glanced around desperately, suddenly aware that several neighbors had emerged from their houses, drawn by her screaming. Mrs. Patterson from next door stood on her porch, arms crossed. The Johnsons were pretending to check their mailbox, while obviously eavesdropping. Even old Mr. Chen had paused his morning walk to witness the spectacle. "We'll discuss this inside," Karen hissed through gritted teeth. "No, we won't." David pulled a manila envelope from his bathrobe pocket. "We'll discuss it in court. You've been served, Karen. I filed for divorce yesterday." The envelope fluttered to the ground as Karen staggered backward. "You can't be serious." "Over money? David, we can work this out. It's not about the money." David's voice cracked for the first time. "It's about trust. It's about respect. It's about the fact that you've been lying to me for years while I worked 16-hour days to pay for your lifestyle. Our lifestyle." Karen's desperation made her voice shrill. "Everything I did was for us, for our family." "What family?" The words came out like a gunshot. "Emma won't even talk to you anymore after what you said at her graduation. When was the, last time you asked about my work? My feelings? When was the last time you cared about anything besides your reflection in that damn pool?" Karen's face contorted with rage. "How dare you? I gave you the best years of my life. I made this house a home. You made this house a showcase," David interrupted. a stage for your performance. But there's no audience anymore, Karen, just mirrors. The demolition trucks rumbled to life, drowning out Karen's sputtering protests. Miguel approached hesitantly. Mr. Whitmore, we're all finished here. The concrete needs 48 hours to cure completely. David nodded. Thank you. Send the final invoice to my attorney. As the trucks pulled away, Karen stood alone on the concrete slab, her designer sundress fluttering in the morning breeze. The space where her pool had been looked impossibly vast and empty, a concrete wasteland that reflected the hollow feeling growing in her chest. This isn't over, she whispered, then louder. This isn't over, David! But her husband had already disappeared back into the house, leaving her standing on her concrete stage with an audience of judgmental neighbors and nowhere left to perform. Karen pulled out her phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? I need police immediately, Karen said, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. Someone has destroyed my property. Vandalism. Theft. I want them arrested. Ma'am, can you describe what happened? Karen stared at the concrete pad, her mind racing. David thought he was so clever, but he'd made one crucial mistake. The pool had been in her name. Only her name. The original permit, the property deed, modification, even the insurance policy, all bore Karen Whitmore's signature alone. They stole my pool, she said into the phone, her voice growing stronger with each word. My husband hired criminals to destroy my property without my consent. This is theft, and I have witnesses. As she spoke, Karen caught her reflection in the living room window. For just a moment, she didn't recognize the woman staring back. Wild-haired, desperate, standing alone on a concrete slab like some tragic figure from a play she'd forgotten she was acting in. But then she straightened her shoulders, smoothed her hair, and prepared for her final performance. After all, she still had an audience to convince. Officer Maria Rodriguez had seen her share of domestic disputes in her 12 years on the force, but something about the blonde woman pacing frantically on the concrete slab made her instincts twitch. Karen Whitmore was too composed, too rehearsed, like an actress who'd memorized her lines but forgotten her motivation. So let me understand this correctly, Officer Rodriguez said, flipping through her notepad. Your husband hired a demolition crew to fill in your pool without your knowledge or consent? Exactly, Karen's voice carried perfectly across the gathering crowd of neighbors. This is destruction of property, criminal mischief. I want him arrested immediately. Officer Rodriguez's partner, Detective James Murphy, emerged from the house, where he'd been interviewing David. His weathered face was unreadable, but Karen caught the slight shake of his head directed at Rodriguez. Mrs. Whitmore, Detective Murphy said carefully, your husband showed me the permits. They appear to be in order. I don't care about permits! Karen's perfectly manicured mask began to slip. That was my pool! The deed clearly states, actually, ma'am, we'll need to see those property documents. Rodriguez's tone had shifted, becoming more professional, more distant. Could you provide them for us? Karen's stomach lurched. The property documents were in David's office, locked in his filing cabinet. She'd never needed to access them before. David handled all the paperwork, all the boring legal details she'd been happy to ignore. They're inside. David has them. But I'm telling you, that pool was registered in my name only. I can prove... Karen. David's voice cut through her protests like a blade. He stood in the doorway holding a thick folder, his face grim but determined. Stop lying. I'm not lying. But even as the words left her mouth, Karen felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Not literally this time, but something far more dangerous. Detective Murphy accepted the folder from David and began spreading documents across the hood of his patrol car. Karen watched in growing horror as he laid out permits, property deeds, mortgage papers, and bank statements like evidence at a crime scene. According to these documents, Murphy said slowly, the pool construction was financed through a joint home equity loan. Both your signatures are required for any major modifications to the property. That's impossible, Karen whispered, but the words felt hollow. Furthermore, Murphy continued, it appears that Mr. Whitmore discovered significant financial irregularities in your joint accounts. Unauthorized withdrawals, hidden credit cards, a second mortgage taken out. He looked up at Karen with professional detachment. Without his knowledge or consent. The color drained from Karen's face as she realized the trap she'd walked into. By calling the police, by demanding they investigate property theft, she'd opened her own financial dealings to scrutiny. Now wait just a minute, she began, but Officer Rodriguez cut her off. Mrs. Whitmore, we're going to need you to come to the station for questioning. Questioning? About what? Bank fraud, for starters, Detective Murphy said, still examining. The documents. Identity theft. Forgery. He held up a mortgage application. This signature claiming to be your husband's. Did you sign this? Karen's throat went dry. The second mortgage application, she'd been so careful, had practiced David's signature dozens of times. But now, under scrutiny, her forgery looked clumsy and obvious. David, tell them we discussed this. But David just shook his head sadly. I never saw that document until yesterday, Karen. I never authorized a second mortgage. I never even knew it existed until the bank called about missed payments. Mrs. Patterson stepped forward from the crowd of onlookers. Officers, I witnessed the entire conversation this morning. Mrs. Whitmore was screaming about property theft, but her husband clearly stated he had signed all the permits. She's been acting strange for months, added Mr. Johnson, emboldened by his neighbor's testimony. Screaming at delivery drivers, throwing packages around, threatening to sue everyone in the neighborhood over property lines. Karen spun to face her neighbors, the people she'd smiled at and waved to for over 2 decades. How dare you? I've been nothing but cordial to all of you. Cordial? Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows shot up. You called my grandson a ghetto rat for riding his bike on the sidewalk. You reported the Chens to the HOA for their vegetable garden. You've made this neighborhood miserable with your constant complaints and demands. I was just trying to maintain property values. By terrorizing everyone around you, Mr. Chen said quietly, his accent thick with emotion. My wife cries because of your mean words about our garden. We grow food for our family, not for beauty contest. Detective. Murphy closed the folder with a sharp snap. Mrs. Whitmore, you're under arrest for bank fraud and identity theft. You have the right to remain silent. This is insane. Karen backed away as Officer Rodriguez approached with handcuffs. David, stop this. Tell them this is all a misunderstanding. But David remained frozen in the doorway, watching his wife's carefully constructed world collapse like a controlled demolition. 23 years of marriage, and he was finally seeing Karen clearly, not as the woman he'd fallen in love with, but as the stranger she'd become. The misunderstanding, he said quietly, is that I thought I knew who I married. The handcuffs clicked around Karen's wrists with surgical precision. As Officer Rodriguez guided her toward the patrol car, Karen caught sight of her reflection. In the vehicle's window, disheveled, desperate, defeated. Behind her, the smooth concrete pad stretched like an empty stage where her final performance had just ended. This isn't over, she screamed as they pushed her into the back seat. I'll fight this. I'll sue all of you. David, you'll regret this. But as the patrol car pulled away from the house she'd spent years perfecting, Karen realized with dawning horror that her threats were as empty as the space where her pool used to be. In the distance, she could see David standing alone on their front porch, still holding his coffee mug, watching her disappear down the same street where they'd once walked hand in hand as newlyweds. The audience had finally stopped applauding, and the show at last was over. The Riverside County Jail's processing room smelled like disinfectant and desperation. Karen sat on the metal bench in her orange jumpsuit, staring at her hands, manicured nails now chipped, cuticles ragged from nervous picking. 48. Hours in custody had stripped away more than just her designer clothes. Whitmore, you made bail. Karen looked up to see Correctional Officer Jenkins holding her property bag. She'd expected David, maybe even their daughter Emma, flying in from college. Instead, She found her sister Linda waiting in the lobby, arms crossed, face grim. "Linda, thank God. Don't." Linda's voice was ice cold as they walked toward the parking lot. "Just don't." They drove in silence through the suburban streets. Karen had once ruled like a queen. Everything looked different now, smaller, shabbier, less impressed by her presence. When Linda finally pulled into the driveway of her modest ranch house across town, Karen felt the weight of how far she'd fallen. "You can stay here until you're hearing," Linda said, unlocking her front door. "But we need to talk." Linda's living room was everything Karen had always mocked. Mismatched furniture, family photos in drugstore frames, a coffee table stacked with magazines instead of carefully curated art books. But now, surrounded by the evidence of a real life lived by real people, Karen felt something she'd forgotten how to experience. Shame. "Emma called," Linda said without preamble. "She's not coming home." Karen's stomach dropped. "What do you mean she's not coming home? This is her family crisis. She needs to focus on her senior year at Stanford, which she's paying for herself now that you stole her college fund." Linda's words hit like physical blows. "She also said to tell you that she's done pretending you're the mother she deserves." The air left Karen's lungs in a rush. "She doesn't mean that. Emma's just upset. When she understands what David did to me." "What David did?" Linda's laugh was bitter. "Karen, do you hear yourself? David worked himself into the ground supporting your lifestyle while you committed felonies behind his back. I was trying to maintain our standard of living. By forging his signature? By stealing from your own daughter?" Linda sat heavily on her worn couch. "Karen, I've watched you spiral for years. The constant shopping, the social media obsession, the way you treated everyone around you like servants in your little kingdom." Karen began pacing, her orange jail slides squeaking against the linoleum. "You don't understand the pressure I was under. The neighborhood expectations, the social obligations." "Stop!" Linda's voice cut through Karen's justifications. "Just stop. Do you know what I did while you were sitting in jail?" Karen paused, struck by something dangerous in her sister's tone. "I called Mom." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Their mother had been dead for 3 years. "I called her old number," Linda continued, "because I wanted to hear her voice on the voicemail. Do you know what she says? 'Hi, you've reached Margaret. I'm probably out spoiling my granddaughters. Leave a message and I'll call you back when—' I'm done being the best grandma in the world." Tears started flowing down Linda's cheeks. "She died thinking you were too busy to visit, too important to bring Emma by for Sunday dinners. Do you remember the last thing she said to me? She said, 'I don't know what happened to my little Karen. She used to have such a kind heart.'" Karen felt the walls of the small room closing in. "That's not— I visited Mom. I called— You visited twice in her last 2 years. Both times you spent the entire visit complaining about your problems or showing off your latest purchases." Linda wiped her eyes roughly. She knew Karen. She knew you were drowning, and she was heartbroken watching it happen. The truth hit Karen like a demolition, ball to the chest. She sank onto Linda's second-hand recliner, finally seeing herself through her mother's eyes, not as the successful suburban queen she'd pretended to be, but as a lost woman who'd traded her soul for the illusion of perfection. "I don't know how to fix this," Karen whispered, the words barely audible. "Maybe you can't fix it," Linda said gently. "Maybe that's not the point anymore." Karen's phone, the cheap prepaid one Linda had bought her, buzzed with a text message. It was from David. "Court tomorrow at 9 a.m. My attorney will have the final divorce papers and a plea agreement for the criminal charges. Take it, Karen. It's more generous than you deserve." She stared at the message, then at her reflection in Linda's black TV screen. The woman looking back was hollow-eyed, broken, stripped of everything she'd thought defined her. No designer clothes, no perfect makeup, no audience to perform for. "Linda," she said quietly, "will you come with me tomorrow?" "To court?" Linda studied her sister's face, searching for signs of the girl she'd once known. "Yes, but Karen, this isn't about getting your old life back. That life was built on lies. This is about finding out who you really are underneath all the pretending. That night, Karen lay awake on Linda's fold-out couch, staring at the ceiling. Through the thin walls, she could hear her sister on the phone with Emma, their voices, warm with genuine affection, the kind of relationship Karen had sacrificed on the altar of her perfect image. Outside, she could hear the neighbors talking on their porches, laughing together, living real lives with real connections. For the first time in years, Karen wasn't performing for anyone. There was no audience to impress, no image to maintain, just a broken woman in her sister's living room, finally ready to stop pretending she had it all together. The pool was gone. The house would be gone soon. The marriage was over, and her daughter might never forgive her. But maybe in the rubble of her demolished life, Karen could finally find something real to build on. Maybe it wasn't too late to remember who she used to be before she became the person everyone, including herself, had learned to hate.